Hello and welcome to I Want to Grow, and I Want to Grow is all about that, right? It's about our growth. But today, it's about the British Council, and it's their 90th year anniversary. And we're here to celebrate just that. So Shoshana, thank you so much for coming on our podcast.
I'm very
Introduce
happy
yourself
to be
and
here.
introduce yourself and tell us what you do.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Shoshana Stewart. I am president of Turquoise Mountain, which is an institution, an entity that was created nearly 20 years ago, but very much in a constant love affair with the British Council. You've been a big part of our lives, so I'm very excited to celebrate that growth as well. In brief, we were created in Afghanistan nearly 20 years ago by His Majesty the King, at that point the Prince of Wales, with the idea of preserving heritage, particularly after decades of war in Afghanistan. But essentially, we support artisans and cultural heritage where it is under threat. And we do it in any way we need to make sure that artisans can thrive and pass it on to the next generation. And that is in Afghanistan, it's in Myanmar and Burma, and also in different parts of the Middle East, working with Syrian, Jordanian, Palestinian, and Saudi artisans in particular.
You are heroes. When you first started this company of yours, did you realize that you were going to get to this powerful position that you're in right now?
Well, I don't know if we're in that powerful position, but no, I certainly couldn't have imagined what this would look like, partially because I came to Afghanistan very serendipitously, and it became my home for many, many years. But I was a teacher, I was a science teacher. And so I didn't come to it with a cultural heritage background. And I have seen, particularly over the last 4 or 5 years, that cultural heritage is a sort of magical power, sort of unicorn in the midst of an increasingly fractious and fragile world. And so that's so true in our work together in Afghanistan, but also across Myanmar and the Levant. So I suppose if I had thought about this 20 years ago, I wouldn't have realized that setting up essentially a craft school and bringing artisan products to market in conflict, post-conflict, and now Taliban-run Afghanistan would work so well, would really matter as much as it did. That has been a great surprise.
I think it's phenomenal with what you've done, and to be in those areas, sometimes with conflict, sometimes with difficult situations. And when I say power, I mean the power that you're giving people to carry on with their lives, giving people the power to keep those cultural things moving along, and for them not to forget their cultural side of their life, where they've come from, and celebrate those things. So that's where I mean power, because sometimes this takes a lot of effort to be able to do this, and in difficult situations. Did you realize going back at the beginning that you were going to be able to do the changes that you've helped make?
No, certainly not. Certainly not. I think a couple things in particular. One is that the initial project in Afghanistan in particular really had 2 aims, which were very connected. One was to try to keep these craft traditions going when nobody had been producing in about 15, 20 years because of the war. So all of the masters, there's a wonderful man named Ustad Abdul Hadi, who was a great master of this lattice woodwork, this jointed woodwork that you can see through, that you put above doors and the light comes through, and it's about decoration and privacy and Islamic geometry, and it's just an incredibly beautiful tradition. So Abdul Hadi was a great master, worked for the king, but when we met him, he was just selling things in the bazaar, fruit and other things, because he had no students, he had no markets. So at that point, all of these craft traditions, except carpet weaving really, were like that, where you had an older generation who had practiced it before, but it stopped. They hadn't been able to pass it down. So what do you do with that, right? So that was the first thing. We were going to create a school of Afghan arts and architecture to pass it down to the next generation. And the second thing was to put that art school in the center of the old city as a means of reviving the physical infrastructure of this unbelievable historic city, which had been decimated by war, not only because it was on the front lines of the Civil War, but also because it had just been not maintained. And when you have mud brick buildings that are not maintained, I think we can picture what happens. They collapse. And so the transformation that then happened, particularly over those first 5 years, was one of the great joys of my life, to watch 150 historic courtyard buildings just come back to life, and the family members who lived in them working on those buildings and then living in them. And Murad Khani today is one of the great old city neighborhoods that I've ever been to. It's beautiful mud brick facades, decorative woodwork. You can walk down the traditional silver bazaar. There's a clinic. It's mixed use with family houses and schools and clinics and religious buildings and the bazaar street. So it is everything that an old city neighborhood should be. So I suppose that transformation was a joy to watch, and certainly a surprise. And the other thing that was a surprise, I suppose, is that we knew that what we were there to do was to try to get young people back into these traditions so that it made it one more generation. What we didn't realize is that we, as a charity, had to figure out how to sell things, because if you can't make money, these traditions won't survive. And so we ended up figuring out how to export, and that's been the other great uphill battle, but eventually great surprises of what we've done.
So you've taken Mr. Hadi into a whole different way of life. I bet you can still remember those first students that were your first ones. Have you ever followed the footsteps of them now?
You're so right about that's the way that teachers work. And yes, very much. And actually, Abdul Hadi, when we started working with him, he's in his 70s, and he passed away a few years ago. But he has passed down his skills to hundreds of men and women in Afghanistan, actually. And one of the people I remember most was a man named Masood, who he was a young guy. I mean, we're probably similar ages. And he is now running that department in our institute. And so, yeah, I very much remember him as student, and then teacher, assistant teacher, and now department head. And he really is the legacy of Abdul Hadi, and actually his own father, who was a joinery expert. Yes, I do remember those first students. There was another incredible woman named Samira Kitman, who was just an unbelievable miniature painter and calligrapher, but also a very fierce businesswoman. And she's running her own business. And Fakhriya Nazami also. Yes, I remember those early students. You're absolutely right.
You're trying to keep those traditions going, but the storytelling, your stories, have you wrote a book yet? Because the stories that you must have and the changes that you've gone through must be just unbelievable. It's going to be a fascinating read. And I'd be one of the first people to buy your book.
You're very sweet. I don't think I'm going to write the book, though. And I'll tell you why. I live with an author. My husband is a really beautiful writer. And I think when you live with a writer, you realize what a serious thing it is. And I think I'm not a writer, but I do a little bit of teaching for Yale's Global Affairs School. It's called the Jackson School. And I do love that, which is about trying to pass on to younger people who are, I'm just past this phase myself. I feel like I'm been doing this for 20 years, but it surprises me. But young people who are trying to get into the space of working in global affairs, in international development, in international cultural heritage, what are the realities of trying to run a good project and trying to do something in the midst of increasing craziness, just absolute craziness, from conflict to sanctions to all of these things. But how can you still try to keep the humanity and the beauty and run a project that makes a difference?
I'm getting at this with you being a school teacher, and I'm quite old now, and I'm hitting my microphone at the same time, but I'm quite old now, but I can still remember all my school teachers and those that had an influence on my life. That must be another rewarding thing, because you would have saw them as children or a little bit older than children, and now probably some of these students that you've seen over the years have probably got their own families.
It's so true. It's so true. There's a double thing, which is that when I began in Afghanistan, I was quite young myself. I was in my mid-20s. And so I was the young person, really. And so there's a generation of Afghans who taught me how to be in the world, really. I feel an immense sense of gratitude to them. And the director of our institute and our engineering team in particular. And then there are people, Afghans who are my age, and we sort of came into our professional being at the same time. And now we all have children. We've met each other's children and that sort of thing. Actually, I got to bring my kids to Afghanistan this year for the first time. It was never, the security didn't allow it before. So that was amazing to be able to show them.
You and your team, I tell you, you all deserve medals. Phenomenal what you're doing. And it's something that the world needs right now. And it's not just, I think we all need it. We all need to kind of remember our values. So honestly, congratulations. Now, we're celebrating the British Council. How have they helped? You said as well, they've been, let me say instrumental, or they've been such a help with you. How have you worked together in these years?
So there are a couple of different ways. One is very much about the founding of our institute. And the second is about the Cultural Protection Fund, which I think is a really beautiful thing in the world. So the first, when we set up this institute, it was just part of Turquoise Mountain, which is an international NGO, a British NGO, right? But what we realize is the point of this thing is to be the keeper of these traditions for the long term, that Afghanistan didn't have anymore a sort of vocational school that focused on Afghan traditions or anything like that of any kind. And so we realized this needs to be an Afghan institution. And so when I left Kabul, living there full time in 2011, we set up an Afghan NGO, a local NGO, and there's an international board of trustees, but this is run by an incredible director who he and I have been doing this together, as have many of the board members, for almost 20 years, all of us. One of the very first board members was the British Council ex officio. So it began with the head of the British Council then, Paul Smith, but then Dawood was took his place, and we've always had a member of the British Council on that board. So that was incredibly important, both in the stewarding of that institution, but also in making it an Afghan entity that is connected internationally. So that was incredibly important. The second is that when the destruction of Palmyra happened, and the British Council, I think, was the first to say, and the Department for Culture, Media and Sport were the first to say, this is not okay. We cannot destroy our heritage in war. It is a conscious act of destruction. It matters. We're going to create the Cultural Protection Fund. And it is certainly why we exist, that we believe that cultural heritage matters. It matters to our souls. It matters to an individual nation and to the world. It connects us. But the Cultural Protection Fund gave us an incredible grant, one of the first large grants. And we rebuilt so many buildings and trained so many traditional builders and masons. And that transformation of the old city neighborhood, Morid Khani, into what it is was so much in partnership with the British Council.
It's phenomenal when you think about this, how destructive it could have been to how you're putting back in, that they must have been it must have been a celebration to be able to kind of start growing again, start getting things back into order, start giving them some trades. It's phenomenal. You're one. I keep on saying this, and I try to empathize or understand what people go through, but I just can't begin to. I just can't begin to go through what it must have been like. So yeah, I keep on thinking about those images. But wonderful, and to think how they must be feeling with those trades and being trained by some of the best to then go and to have a legacy themselves when there couldn't have been much hope.
Yeah, it's frankly a lot of fun, actually, because there's so much terribleness around, and that's been true in Afghanistan over the last 20 years since I've been working there, different kinds of difficulty. Unbelievably true in Palestine right now, in the West Bank where we work, obviously, in Jordan, and true in Syria. But the surprising thing that we have found is that the worse things get, it seems like almost the more cultural heritage matters. And it's part of what you're talking about there, which is, I mean, when everything goes wrong, when security disappears, when your sense of the future disappears, when public services stop working, you have to be able to feed your family. So we have to be able to sell these things. The economic bit of what we do has to work. And I think that's not always done as seriously as it needs to be in the handmade, in craft. But what we found is that you need to be able to feed your family, but it's not only about money. There is something special about making. It is the therapy of using your hands. It is this connecting to your inheritance, your heritage, and getting it on to the next generation. Creating something beautiful where there is a lot of ugliness around you. And I do think it can feel like fun in the midst of some really terrible stuff. And I felt that with, I can picture we have this amazing carpenter, Jawed, who just like every morning you see him and he's got huge, just pushing this lathe across wood, and there are wood chips flying everywhere. He's got this crazy smile on his face. He's cracking jokes. There is just, Afghanistan at that phase, it's a rough place, and there are suicide bombs happening all over the place. Poverty was very immense, but he was doing something with his hands and making something really beautiful. And we were talking about the size of the lotus flower that he was going to carve on the thing. There is something special about that. And I feel like that, in the West Bank over the last year plus, I mean, there are so many difficult things happening there. Difficult is a stupid word. It's
the sense of worth they must get from this it's unmeasurable. It must be. And listening to the lotus flower, and I can see myself standing, and as you're saying, the wood chips are flying everywhere, and then he's there talking, and he's getting excited about what he's going to do. Oh, it must be so rewarding for everybody concerned. You're in Switzerland right now. I'm in Doha. You've done a lot of stuff with Qatar. What have you done with Qatar?
So Qatar is an unbelievable partner and presence in Afghanistan. Very, very unique. I've never seen it anywhere else, which is that, of course, because the Doha talks were hosted there, I think Qatar has a different relationship with Afghanistan than the rest of the world, and is frankly in the same place that we are, which is that, okay, here's the situation. What are we going to do about it? How are we going to make things better? We're going to deal with the situation, which I think quite a lot of the world is very disturbed by our relationship with Afghanistan over 20 years, 50 years, et cetera, and can't quite just deal with it as it is right now. And so I think that's the starting point. We've had a relationship with Qatar since 2011, and they, through Reach Out to Asia and the Museum of Islamic Art and Sheikh Mayasa, began with primary education, primary health support, and then they hosted an exhibition called Firuz Ko, which means Turquoise Mountain, in Dari, at the Museum of Islamic Art. It was the first big international exhibition that we did, and it was unbelievable for the artisans. They flew 20 artisans to Qatar, put them in the vaults of the museum with blue plastic gloves on for 2 weeks to just be with these objects in this collection. Then they went back to Afghanistan and they created 40 objects in response to 40 objects from the museum's collections, not copies. So you have an incredible carpet page, the illuminated page on the Quran. And there was a piece of woodwork made out of 7 different depth levels out of this motif, just unbelievable. And it just forced artisans to a new level of excellence. So that was the first really big thing. And then we have been partnering with the Qatar Fund for Development. We did a pilot year and have just now begun a next phase. And that is over the next phase going to basically create employment for 11,000 women in Afghanistan through focusing on carpet weaving. And carpets are special in Afghanistan. They are special in the world, and that has to do with the weaving tradition and the dyes, and in particular, the incredible Ghazni wool, which, you know, those sheep are sitting in some very extreme temperature changes, and it gives them some very beautiful, lustrous, oily wool. And so this Ghazni wool does create a really special piece in the end. And so what Qatar is doing is investing in what Afghanistan has, not what it doesn't have. It has these incredible natural resources. It has a weaving industry that's been going for generations, 1 million trained weavers. And these women are really the only breadwinners in their homes right now. The Afghan economy is in a very difficult place. So for me, what Qatar is doing more widely feels very much like what we're doing in partnership, which is it is working with what Afghanistan has, its natural assets, and dealing with the realities that are there right now and what can we do with that. And that will impact 11,000 women and 11,000 families this year.
And the ripple effect of that is just phenomenal. And I wish, like your group, I know the British Council, as I said to you at the beginning, I didn't know much about what the British Council done. I just thought it was testing centers and then what Qatar does. And it's like, I wish the world to know all this information, because I look at what Qatar does. I look at what I'm so blessed that I've heard about you and your company and the work that the British Council does, that there's some magnificent people out there that just want to make huge differences for the good of mankind, to develop, to help, to guide, to support. And you people out there, you're making those massive differences. And I sometimes I wish Qatar would get more recognition for the things that they do. But obviously there is people like you out there. There's so many different people, but they want to get involved for the right reasons, which is really, really amazing.
I feel that so strongly. My interactions with particularly the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Qatar, the past minister and the current minister for international development, Miriam Al-Misnad and Lulwa Al-Khater before her, and Sheikh Mohammed as his role as foreign minister and as prime minister. My interactions with them have been better than almost any government I can think of. The degree of professionality, respect, carefulness, thoughtfulness, strategic is unbelievable. I cannot say that I have a better relationship with any government out there. And the way that they look at Afghanistan is so careful and special. And I feel very grateful for it. I do wish more people knew about the way that works.
Me too. But your words just then, it summed it up completely. And that recognition that you've just given is testament to what they're doing. Something similar. I was at ITCAN. It's a simulation center, and it brought, I think it was about 40 doctors that were training to look at cataracts and help train them in the cataracts. And it went back to Afghanistan. Those 40 doctors that was trained here went back to Afghanistan and give sight back to nearly 700 people, which is phenomenal. And it's those differences that sometimes we just don't get to hear about. But it makes me feel wonderful because the world is in a good place. It's just that you've got to sometimes dig yourself to see what's going on. And with people like yourself and so many others, the world's in a good shape right now. It may not look like it, but there's people there that's giving that support. And I keep on, I'm a broken record. I thank you. I thank everybody. I thank everybody to not walk away from these challenges. You've done it remarkably. I don't need to say that. You've done remarkably well, but I take my hat off to you. I'm just, it's been a huge thing for me today to talk to you.
Well, we
Where
need
do
more
you
of your
see the
optimism, Steve. Definitely need more of your optimism.
No, because sometimes we could lose hope, right? Sometimes we're scared about using our voices. Sometimes we need to be guided from others. And I for one, listening to your stories, this is great for me because I've got the podcast called I Want to Grow. And I get to talk to some amazing people because it's not about their growth, it's about them helping others grow. And you fall into that bracket. Qatar falls into that bracket. Everybody I speak to falls into that bracket. And the more and more I meet these people, the more and more, the better I feel that humanity is being left in a really good way. Because with these things that you're teaching and training people to do are the backbone of these communities that sometimes get forgotten, right? And you're not forgetting, and people around the world is not forgetting, and people want them to go on and celebrate their culture and keep those traditions alive. And that's what we need to do more of. We need those voices out there that's louder than the other voices. Unfortunately, we've got those other voices that are drowning everything out. But we need to come together, and I think it's where people like you are going to make that happen. I'm really blessed that I've spoke to you today. And going forward, how do you see yourself working with the British Council from now on? How is it developing? What's your next ambitions with them?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, I think that we fundamentally, I mean, as you say, a lot of people know the British Council for English language and testing centers, right? I know the British Council for its role in culture. And we are part of a small group together that looks at the power of cultural heritage in conflict, and our world is increasingly in conflict. And so when I think of the British Council, there are probably 6, 7 organizations that this is where we live. We live talking about cultural heritage and conflict, and the British Council is one of those majors. And so that's where I think of things. So, you know, we'll be speaking to one of the British Council directors on Monday, and we will be talking about Afghanistan and Palestine and Burma and the places where we work together. But they're a sort of trusted, experienced voice in that. And it's not a big, it's not a big group. It's a small group. It's a small club.
On a personal level, do you ever worry about your own safety when you're in these countries? Are you ever fearful?
So, I mean, certainly, I've spent many years managing our security. So I certainly think about and manage in a technical way the questions of risk and security. I think that, well, I have kids now, and I didn't 10 years ago, and I treat my personal security slightly differently now, for sure. But no, the answer is I'm not very fearful. But you've got to manage it. I mean, Afghanistan, from when I started working there and living there in 2006 until 2021, was a bad security situation. And I think I wouldn't be living there again with children during that time as I was then. But nowadays it's not really a security issue by and large. And so that's why I was able to take my family there. It's not that it's not any security issue, but you have to manage these things.
Oh God, Shoshana, I honestly, I'm ignored. I'm emotionally, I tell you, I am so glad that we've got people like you in the world, and your team, of course, and everybody else that we spoke about today. We really do need to celebrate people like yourself. And I'm just in so many ways, I'm so glad that we've got this conversation with you, because you deserve that spotlight putting on you for what you're doing. So thank you so much for joining us today. There's one question that I need to ask.
Sure.
There's one question. One word that can explain what the British Council means to you in just one word.
Gosh. I mean, I have to think about that. Honestly, the first thing that popped in my head was friendship, which is not really a professional.
No, that's
but,
amazing.
I felt a real sort of camaraderie and friendship with the British Council over these years. So that'll be my word.
I hope that I'll be around to see your 50th year. That's for sure in this program. And I hope you have the same successes as 90 years and 100 years. And I hope this legacy of your turquoise company, that I hope it goes for generations, because what you've created is something very, very special. And I'm honored for you to be on our podcast today. And I'm so blessed that you've come to be able to tell your story and tell the world.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for doing it. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful thing you all are celebrating.
Shoshana, thank you so much again.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, and it's been a real joy. Thank you so much indeed.